Good morning and welcome everyone. My name's Gary Rowe. I'm the CEO of Safety Action and I'm going to facilitate this month's safety update, which is our regular monthly webinar to keep you up to date with the news, what's happening around in workplace safety. So our key topics today, we're looking at the new on-the-spot safety fines, which have rolled out in Victoria. We're going to look at a workers' compensation case where a worker was unable to give the accident date, and we'll tell you what the court said about that. We're going to look at the new Victorian draft code of practice on workplace facilities, which they've updated. WA has introduced an interesting code of practice on workplace behaviour, and it's got some interesting parts to it and considerations that I'll explain to you shortly. And another interesting workers' compensation case on vibration injury, and this one cost $1.5 million. And it interests me. I've been a safety engineer since I became the safety engineer at the Department of Agriculture 30 years ago. I moved from civil engineering, structural engineering into safety engineering, and I've never heard of a vibration injury costing this much. So we're going to look at that as well. So let's just take us through some of these interesting topics today that we like to give you in a very short, bright and breezy style, maybe over a morning cup of coffee. You can just tune in and listen to the latest news on what's happening in safety. So Worksafe Victoria has announced their inspectors can now commence issuing infringement notices like a speeding fine that the police might issue, which is an on-the-spot fine. The fines are going to range from about $1,000 to nearly $2,000, so they'll probably average about $1,500 a fine. They're going to be targeted and only allowed for certain breaches. And so the things that the WorkSafe inspectors have been authorised to issue on-the-spot fines for include working without a prescribed licence, for example, a crane operator unlicensed or a forklift driver unlicensed will be examples. Lack of qualifications and experience or supervision. So presumably supervision would be a breach for the company, and also if they allowed workers who didn't have the necessary qualifications or experience, which might be different to a licence. Using equipment or chemicals that are not licensed or registered. So that'll be particularly equipment that might need certain registration. Unsafe movement or storing of asbestos, and failing to keep certain records. I haven't got the detail of what those records will be yet, but if we become aware of more details on those, we will bring them to you in our next or follow-up webinar. Probably an important point for you to note, for people to think, these new laws. Well, not really. WorkSafe have long had the ability to issue on-the-spot fines, if you like, infringement notices. They've largely not used them. So they've now announced that for these categories of breaches, these are the options that will be brought forward. Clearly, if you believe and you're aggrieved and they're wrong, you can appeal against them or indeed have it taken to court. So you need to understand this is not introducing new safety laws or new obligations for you or your business. It's merely a different mechanism for WorkSafe to issue infringement notices instead of going through probably a lengthy and costly process, as in a safety prosecution. So clearly, for the smaller end, for the less severe and maybe, if you like, a technical breach, an infringement notice is far more efficient for the government and WorkSafe. And interestingly, what was it? The Workplace Safety Minister in Victoria, Ingrid Stitt, said that all funds raised through these on-the-spot fines will be put back into the WorkSafe scheme. Maybe jokingly, I'll say not put into charity or to anything else, but back into the WorkSafe scheme. I assume that means back into the government coffers in reality. So there you go, on-the-spot fines for certain categories of breaches and this is commenced from 20 July. So we're not sure how often they'll be used. We don't think they'll be overused, but it is certainly now an option for inspectors, and that might be instead of issuing an improvement notice. So they might say, no, this is a breach. So this is something for you and your business to be aware of. We've also got in this month's newsletter our safety performance benchmarking survey, which we didn't run last year due to COVID, as we mentioned last month. So we want everyone, as of now, to start getting your company safety performance information together. Clearly, the bigger your organisation, the more interested we would like you to participate, but we welcome small companies as well. It's just that larger companies, their data will start to average out. So if you talk about first aid injuries, medical treatment injuries, lost time injuries, or totalable reportable injuries, these will average out over a larger workforce. However, large and small businesses, we welcome everyone to participate. You might be interested to know the typical questions that our survey attempts to answer, and we don't think every other survey like this, safety surveys on safety performance, attempt to do this. But what safety systems actually improve safety performance? So what systems and processes and policies and procedures have you put in place that actually improve safety? So we look to benchmark that across many businesses, and if they've got common systems to you, are they performing similar? Which safety initiatives are people doing that make no difference to safety performance? We try and answer that. I once had a senior executive ask me, do we have too many or too few safety staff? And the executive said, I honestly don't know. And that company had 30 safety people at the time. And so they were looking for advice. And we can't tell you, but initially, but once we run the survey, and we've got good data on this now running over a number of years, we actually do have some benchmarks we can share. It doesn't make it right or wrong, but it gives an indication whether you're right out of kilter, if you like, with your average and what it might be. Many industries benchmark against themselves. The water industry benchmarks amongst other water industry and construction industry and so on. But this might be a bit like I'm a big fish in a very small pond. What if you're a cafe and you said, well, we've won the award for the best cafe with 2 waiters and 4 tables with a certain brand of coffee in Lygon Street? Well, you might be a big fish in a very small pond. What this survey attempts to do is to say, look, outside of your own industry, what are the trends? And are you really performing as good as you could be? And in fact, improvement may not be enough. Sometimes you have to improve a lot more than you currently are to keep up with what the rest of industry is doing. So your own data may show you've improved year on year, and you tell your execs, hey, we're great. We've reduced work injuries in our business. We're improving safety. This is nice. But has industry outstripped you? So this is why we think everyone, all the readers of our safety newsletter, all of our customers and all of our friends, and if you know somebody else who's in a business, particularly in a safety role, HR role, operational manager role, encourage that business to go to our website, just click on the link to the survey and I'll show you. 1, the survey is quick and easy to participate in. Our survey is not difficult. The data that we're looking for is something you should have at your fingertips. And I would question any safety professional who says we don't have that data. I have to question any competent business who doesn't have the data that we're asking. It is not unusual data. It's not difficult to collect. All the data is kept confidential. And indeed, in the report, no organisations are named or identified, and all participants are given an ID number. So within the report, you can see who you are and where you fit in the spread of all of the relevant parameters that we report on. It's okay if you don't answer every question. So some people say, I don't have the information on X. Don't care. Fill in, just give us the return with whatever questions you can answer. So for example, if you know the number of lost time injuries, but you don't know the number of people who had a first aid injury, then give us how many people, give us the data you've got for lost time injuries. We're benchmarking all of these categories. And so even if you give us the lost time injury data, for example, that is great because that gives us a bigger pool of data to make our averages and benchmarks more accurate. So even if it is only, for example, lost time injuries. Some people say, oh, medical treatments we're not so sure, or first aid we don't know, so be it. So that's what it'll be. It identifies initiatives that actually do improve safety, as I've mentioned earlier. So I think you'll find the report very interesting, and I encourage every business to participate in the survey. It's open now. Go to safetyaction.com.au on our website, click on the link for the survey, which is shown there on the front page. Easy to fill out, easy to submit. Andrea Rowe, our General Manager, is presenting at the World Congress on Safety and Health at Work for 2021, which is this year hosted by the Canadian group, but of course due to the COVID restrictions. And indeed, I understand for the first time in its 66-year history, it's being run as an interactive online presentation. So Andrew will be speaking on safety and robots and the latest technology and information there, but it'll now be online. So once again, you can go to the website shown here and also in our newsletter and on our website if you're interested, and actually, if not participate, you can register for the session online, or indeed just sit in on some of the sessions or pick them up as they're recorded. I mentioned earlier about a workers' compensation claim where the worker was not able to identify an actual injury date, and in this case, the company I do apologise. I was just just looking down at my notes, and so the company appealed against the claim and said, "Oh, look, the person hasn't filled out all of the information required," and so this ultimately got to the district court in WA. So this happens to be a WA case, but I think the principles are most likely to apply to every state. And so what they've found here is that the worker sustained a torn tendon and shoulder bursitis, but the pain built up over time, so during the course of the work. So when asked, when did you first notice this injury, you and I might struggle also to actually recall a specific date or time. And you sustained something minor at one stage, weren't sure whether that was from home, sport or work. Over a period of time, you might notice it's always occurring when you're working, so doing a particular task. So there's the connection that you believe now it's the work that's actually causing this, and maybe lodging a workers' compensation claim. So what the WA District Court has determined that a workers' compensation claim is valid even if it is unable to provide the exact injury date, and especially where this is gradual onset injuries. So just sharing that with you, maybe the company just thought it was a technicality, but it was worth a shot to deny the claim. Whether that's appropriate or not is up to you to decide. I suspect that companies should look at the merits of the case, and the fact that they're unable to provide an injury date is not critical or germane. And indeed, the district court found that that was the case. And I'm fairly confident that the work injury courts in every state of Australia would conclude similar. So just something to look out for. I mentioned earlier that Victoria has updated the compliance code on workplace facilities. So the draft is out. It's updated the old or existing 2008 compliance code on workplace facilities. It covers things like number of toilets, hand basins, seating, particularly both at workstations, at lunchrooms, etc., ventilation, lighting, flooring, and it's introduced mobile workers. So particularly following COVID, many of our clients and friends are telling us that their offices in the city are now working for a permanent post-COVID situation. And so they're anticipating that their workers will increasingly be mobile and maybe in the office 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week. That's not been set in stone, but they actually anticipate more of the workforce will be mobile. And indeed, the new code is specifically accommodating outdoor workers, which were not overtly covered in the current code. And of course, it'll still pick up emergency planning and requirements. Now, you need to understand this is called a compliance code. So it's actually has more onus on employers to comply with this than a normal code of practice, because this actually is linked back to the Victorian safety legislation, and it is a recognised compliance code. So you'll have deemed compliance if you comply with this code. To ignore the code will obviously not give you the deemed compliance code. So it's out in draft. We'll let you know. It's expected to be formalised by late this year, by the end of this year, and we'll update you, particularly if the requirements in it, if there's any other unusual things that come out in the final draft or final copy, we'll let you know as well. I'm not sure if you know, we reported it some time ago that in Victoria, Worksafe amended the incident notification regulations to require employers to notify them if an employee contracted COVID-19 and if the person had attended the workplace within the infectious period. So we told you this earlier. What we're letting you know is that these regulations have been extended. So they're called the COVID-19 Incident Notification Regulations 2021, have now been extended and will run to the 27th of July next year. So this continues that if anybody you know, if any of their workers contract COVID and they were in the workplace during their infectious period, then you're required to notify Worksafe. So extension of those notification requirements. Andrea of our team likes to keep across the safety month, safety week, and all the key events that come up from time to time. And Andrea has alerted me to the Safe Work Month, which is for Australia, October. And Safe Work Australia, it's an annual event, run this. It commences on 1 October. They have kits available on the Safe Work Australia website. We see this as an opportunity to promote safety awareness. I sometimes have questioned myself, why are we having Safety Week or Safety Month? Isn't it every single working day or every day? It should be Safety Day. And the reality is, you and I, we get busy doing the things we do and we don't always keep the same level of focus. And so I'm starting to soften my stance a little bit to what I thought were shallow events that had no great meaning. And so as an old-fashioned safety engineer, I'm seeing this, let's treat it for what it is. It's a great initiative. What it is simply attempting to raise the safety awareness, and you can't do it all the time because we've got lots of other things to concentrate on. So clearly it's going to be a day or it's going to be a week. In this case, it will run over a month. So October, Safe Work Australia Safety Month, and it's an opportunity to raise awareness with your team. You may create plans, we'll run over the whole year. So the month is only the opportunity to run events, do things to bring this back into focus for your team. And we invite you to share your plans. We'd love to share them next month or the following month or in our newsletter. Anything great, interesting or innovative that you tell us that you did during Safety Month. So keep that in mind. Email us or call our office, any of our team, Sarah, Miriam in the admin team, or Ben helping out, or just email inquiries@safetyaction.com.au. We'd love to hear what you did or what you've heard that others are doing that might actually be something that others could pick up and do. So there you go. So share that with us as well. I mentioned right at the outset this to me, very interesting vibration injury. And the reason it's interesting to me is that in 30 years as a safety engineer, this is the first case that I've heard that has been so serious. So serious, obviously, to cost a Queensland company $1.5 million, which sounds quite surprising. You will all know it. It's commonly referred to as white finger. And if you've ever, either on a motorbike or a piece of machinery, it could be a rotary hoe, could be a lawnmower, and you've been using it for quite a while, we experience numbness and tingling sensation in our fingers and hands. And over my working career and my life, I've always known it. I've known this numbness and tingling, which is commonly referred to as white finger, but I've never thought and treated it as a serious or permanent condition. So clearly this is a case which has had a significant impact on a worker. And normally I don't think the employer would be seen to be so grossly negligent to actually incur costs of $1.5 million. But when you read a bit more about the case, they had a vibration specialist give advice on exposure limits for this particular piece of machinery, which I think from memory was in the coal, I think it was Kestrel Coal Proprietary Limited in Queensland is the actual company in this case. So very large piece of machinery in the coal mining and transport industry. And they knew there was significant vibration in this large piece of plant. They even had specialist engineers look at it, and the specialist engineers gave advice that they recommended, unless other changes were made to the equipment, that workers be limited to 2 hours per day exposure to operate this equipment. And what the court heard in this particular case is that the worker operated the piece of machinery and plant for an average of 8 hours a day over a 12.5-hour shift, and did this for quite a period of time. Now, normally, as I said, I've always understood the white finger syndrome is a temporary syndrome and would dissipate. In this case, obviously, it is severe enough that the medical advice is that operator can no longer operate that machinery. So what we understand is that the bulk of the $1.5 million you see here awarded for negligence on the company's part causing this injury is for future wages, because the evidence presented to the court was the worker will not be able to operate this machinery again. And apparently this is a highly paid job, and that the person is expected will need to look at alternate employment at much lower wages than that worker had been currently getting. So the courts don't look at what is a good enough wage for you and I. They look at what the person was actually earning, and that's how they compare it. So this is the lost future earnings of this person. The company also introduced other evidence of prior work and prior health condition of the worker, which the court dismissed. So, for example, I think it was pointed out that the worker was a smoker, previously worked in the fishing industry and as a boiler maker, which they argued had other equipment with significant vibration, and that the person had a pre-existing blood vessel disease. And once again, the courts have discounted this and discounted that as a grounds of appeal or to deny this claim on the basis that they're negligent. They knew the vibration risk. They ignored the professional advice they had on the limitations or make some improvements to this equipment. And so based on that negligence, someone's prior health or prior work may have had some bearing, but as you know, to have a satisfactory workers' compensation claim, it doesn't have to be the sole cause or even the primary cause. Merely that the work that you gave the person added to the condition and exacerbated the condition. So if your business does that, then you could well be liable. So what this tells us is, one, treat vibration injuries and vibration seriously. Think about whether we can actually use the hierarchy of control and minimise this wherever possible. And if not, you're going to look at, can we limit the exposure of individuals, which could be task or job rotation. So I just shared that one with you. And our final topic this morning, I just wanted to touch on, which I also found very interesting this month. So in WA, they've released a draft code of practice on workplace behaviour. I repeat this, on workplace behaviour. And I don't know about you, but I've not come across this to date. So this is our evolving society, and we need to know that safety law is not just about safety. It's a piece of social legislation. It's how we behave and treat each other increasingly. And so this is now formalising what I've just said into a code of practice. And so the significant part is employers will have to demonstrate they had a system in place to minimise or eliminate inappropriate or unreasonable behaviour and to act on it quickly if indeed they're unable to prevent it. So another interesting one is, you ever heard of, we get stressed when we run peak events and peak demand times? Well, that will no longer just be, this is the business you're in and we have these peak times. The code of practice says, no, employers need to adjust staff levels for peak demand. Don't just say that it's okay for workers to be fatigued and stressed when you have unreasonable peak demands. So this is not that you can't be put under any stress. So they'll be looking for what would be unreasonable increase in pressure on staff, and that the employers will need to properly adjust and not just say, it averages out over the year. We have quiet times and we have busy times. So this is going to put a lot more pressure on businesses to actually plan, if you like, their labour force, the resources, the timing of those peak demands and how they deal with it. And another part of the code will be to set achievable performance targets. I imagine that this is aimed at what the unions would argue is employers cunningly using performance and poor performance to manage people they don't like out of the business. So, and many workers would say, it was unachievable. They set a target I could not reasonably achieve. So the code of practice in WA says, you're going to have to set achievable performance targets for personnel. And this is how employees are going to be measured. So this is going to be very interesting. This is a draft and it's only in WA at the moment. Clearly other states around Australia and New Zealand are going to be looking at this closely and considering, do we need something like this in our state? Should we be doing something similar? I suspect we will see variations of this be built into either existing codes or maybe a separate code like this, specifically called workplace behaviour. Hopefully, you and I, you'll never have to experience an employer or a supervisor or managers who behave inappropriately like this and who may be sinister and calculating and just looking to make life miserable for workers or to get rid of people they don't like out of the business. I hope you never have to experience that, but we keep hearing these people and these companies do exist. And because they exist, unfortunately, we need pieces of social legislation being built into our safety legislation and codes to accommodate it. So it looks like it's going to be largely enforced, if this is a workplace code of practice, through Worksafe and not necessarily through Fair Work Australia or some other avenues or through industrial courts. So there you go. So before we finish off, as I said, we like to keep this to a brisk, succinct half-hour briefing for you each month with what's going on in safety. Next month, Ben Oley of our team is going to present the first part of a series that he's preparing on safety leadership in unprecedented times. And of course, you can appreciate he's talking about, in particular, the restrictions of COVID, what this is doing, not only in the workplace, but in society. So we look forward to Ben's presentation on that next month. I'll mention a recent experience with some dangerous hydraulic trailer ramps. There's a little picture there of a ramp. That's all very nice. Interestingly, they've been involved in many serious accidents and even fatalities, and they look pretty innocent piece of equipment. And there was a large fine for dangerous forklift use. It wasn't the one in the photo that you see here in the image, but I will explain what that dangerous behaviour is next month. So that's all we've got for this month. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us and for your support as always. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And our next seminar will be Tuesday the 14th of September 2021. I'll just share with you, we might be sending out a revised link for a revised timing for these. Unfortunately, we end up with Andrea, our General Manager, not being available for most of them due to a recurring work commitment, but we will let you know comfortably before then and send the revised link if necessary. So until then, thank you very much for your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month. Keep safe. Bye.